Hello, my name's David Bradley and this is From the Mind of a Mystic. Welcome to the first episode. Now, in today's episode we're going to be discussing basically a meme I saw on the internet, which was related to the idea that people who go back in time in novels or in fiction have to be incredibly careful about what they do, because one tiny alteration in the past can have exponential changes in the future, and why people don't interpret their current situation in the present as being like that, but projected forwards into the future. Hopefully this will make sense. Stick around to find out more. At the end of your personal journey is an amalgamation of every single decision you ever made, every single avenue you were led down, every single force that acted upon you in the universe, in line and out of line with your nature and your intention. In today's video, we're going to be looking at how to master your timeline. As a little preface of how to master your timeline, we need to think about the concept of predeterminism, the idea that from the Big Bang, from the very zenith point of, or the apex point of which the universe was created, things were set into motion as such that it was not so much predestined as though the sequences of events could not have possibly unfolded any way other than the way in which they have unfolded in the universe that you're present in, which is this one. So the idea behind this is there's multiform ideas. So for example, I have this perception that at the end of your life there is basically what's after the equals point. So everything up to where you die is an equation that's played out, and it's multiform, it's infinite, it's an infinite equation that's played out that then results in the equal sign, which is like, so in the present moment the equal sign is what just passed, what just passed, what just passed. And how you are now, a bit like the Buddha says, everything you are is a result of what you've thought. And it's kind of like that. It's like every decision and every force and every nature that's acting upon you is guiding you down an increasingly diverse yet increasingly specific path. And the nature of this video is to discuss ways in which, like, you can alter your decision making process, you can alter the way you relate to the end equal sign at the end of your life, which is the final culminating point before you cease to be part of this universe, however you may believe what happens post that, up to the point of your death. An equation is ticking, and it's ticking, and it's ticking, and learning to navigate systems of awareness surrounding things like synchronicity or interconnectedness with seemingly non-physical forces, or like aligning with certain, even something in very realistic terms is like aligning with a certain group at some point in your life then leads you down a path that then that branches out into all these infinite potential variable timelines, and then you navigate one as a path. So I'm just going to get some more clarity and then I'll be back. So what we're talking about realistically is the multiplicitous form in which any potential given original state can manifest outwardly into, which is as much as to say, you start off with, as a child for example, with a culmination of forces. You've got genetic forces, you've got ancestral forces, you've got familial forces, you've got the culture you're born into, the country, the state, the social hierarchy, the nature of your initial starting point. It to some degree it predetermines like a huge part of the course of your life, and when those forces act upon you, they lead you in a certain direction. But the question I'm sort of going to ask here is, like, at what point can you become conscious of this process? At what point can you start to become not necessarily exhibiting true free will, but more get to the point where the sense of agency is more than just as you as a culmination of forces, and more of a kind of a concise developmental aspiration. So the idea that, like, you're not just steaming along like a predetermined path. It's like the sense that we have of agency, as far as I'm concerned, is fundamentally illusory in the sense that we have it. However, here's a good example, because I'm wittering a little bit. if you are exposed to, say for example, violent abuse, now, depending on the cultural upbringing, the background, the situation, the scenario, how badly that manifests, you could go from care worker to serial killer in a few different branches of the timeline panning out differently. You could be someone that saves people from abuse, or you could be someone that enacts abuse, and it's kind of the key difference between those two timelines is how much you perpetuate what has been enacted upon you, and the way to stop that from happening is to take a conscious role in it. So for example, this kind of ancestral familial background algorithm that runs in the universe, in your life, is like, for example, I may, as a hypothetical scenario, I may suffer violent abuse, but if I then embrace that violent abuse as something that is abhorrent and seek a sense of justice, and then allow myself to navigate the emotions associated with that in a way that compels me towards being a better person, that is an entirely different reaction to the almost instinctual reaction which you would find happens with systemic generational abuse, which is that what comes into you must then be enacted on other people so they understand how you feel, so they get how you this kind of pay it forward, but of malevolence. Like, there's this sense that with generational trauma especially, there is this continual distillation down into a more and more unique form of that negative manifestation of malevolence. And on the antithesis of that, you've got this, like, as it's distilled down, each time someone at the next stage of the wrong owns the negativity, owns the trauma, owns the and processes that in a way that integrates it and makes it manifest in a positive light, it leads down a dramatically different path. And it's sort of like, most people appear to me, including myself the majority of the time, appear to be just barreling down a kind of accidental fathoming of like what is reality, and it's very much unconsidered, it's very much unconscious, it's very much subconscious, in that things are arising out of the field of awareness that are then acting upon you, and then you're reacting to them, instead of like having a distance, which is sort of useful Buddhism precept, is that when you withdraw a bit of a distance and regain a sense of sovereignty and non-reactivity to your environment, that kind of healthy detachment, you end up being able to dramatically overhaul the direction of your life in relation to the predetermined culmination of forces. I'll be back. So this is in so much as to say, when you are subject to reality, so when you're in such a position where like you can see this in unconscious repetitious patterns of attraction in relationships, for example, people tend to end up with more or less the same person over and over again until they figure out what it is that they in negative capacity in relationships. This is quite a common trait. People tend to repeat the same patterns of attraction, the same patterns of behavior, and that doesn't have to be exclusive to relationships. It's like, you must have had it in your own life, like time and time again you are confronted by the same scenario, react to it slightly more evolved, but it just keeps manifesting to you, that barrier, that problem that needs to be solved, and until you identify what those things are, there's no way of having any sense of self-determination in relationship to reality. So you are subject, you are acted upon by reality, but you're not able to guide yourself through reality with any form of intention. And the important part of how to do that is to be able to withdraw emotional attachment specifically, emotional reactivity specifically, when you analyze the critical substructure of your life. Like, what are the recurrent themes? What are the problems that keep needing to be solved, that keep coming up in the same way, in subtler and subtler garbs, but it's still the same wolf in that sheep's clothing? And it's like, until you assess those things, that your life is happening to you, not for you. And like, that's a bit of a cliche thing to say. It's a bit trite, but the nature of reality is, in my experience, is such that that perspective shift between 2 and 4 is incredibly empowering, essential, and actually in the nature of how I experience reality. So I get an enormous amount of mystical experiences that happen spontaneously. I get an enormous amount of feedback from reality, as though it's directly in interaction with my innermost thoughts, and that's perhaps unique to me, but that's what I experience. And perhaps there's many people out there who experience the same. I don't actually know. That's partly why I made this channel. And so what am I driving at? There's a certain extent to which, until you've figured out how automatic, how robotic, how autonomous your cycle of existence is, and the ways in which it is autonomous, cyclic, repetitious, and predetermined, there is no way you can possibly ever have agency or influence over those substructures in your consciousness, and thus, until you've done that, you can't enact change in any meaningful way. So I shall return. So to return to the point that we kind of started out with, this idea of mastering your timeline, the first thing that's going to help you gain, then we'll go further into the metaphysics of it perhaps, but the first thing you need to be able to gain influence over a structure or a system is to understand its components. So to a certain degree, as we were saying in the previous section, like, if you don't know what archetypal or spiritual or non-spiritual, like physical or ancestral or psychological forces are impelling you, like dragging you towards a certain endpoint by the virtue of a culmination of forces, there is no possible way you can influence it. So vis-a-vis, like, you cannot have any influence over a structure or hierarchy or system or navigate reality in any meaningful way until you're able to see the equal sign that's passing away into the past, until you're able to see, like, take a real stock of, like, in a healthily detached way, take stock of like where you are, how you got there, how that will manifest itself further in the future without any kind of external influence. And then once you've kind of got through this, you've done that kind of work and gone like, okay, I'm a culmination of forces. That's kind of an undeniable thing. It's not the only thing we are. I personally believe that we are a spirit or a soul. But however you interpret it is absolutely fine. I feel as though there is a certain extent to which we are not just riding around in a meat skeleton navigated, but, you know, there is something more than just electricity. There is something more than just the external actions on us. There's something unique to every single conscious or possibly unconscious entity that is an acting force upon reality because it is immersed within it. Like the sub-equations, the kind of the algebraic structure of reality is such that without any one given element, the outcome would be dramatically different. Like, that every variable is relevant in a massive infinite equation. Like, there is no way in which you could subtract your relevance, and that's also an inspiring thought to me as well. Like the idea that however little you perceive yourself to be, however insignificant your one individual existence is, it is a variable in an infinite equation that without you would function and manifest completely differently. And then the next part of that is this sense of agency, this the sense of like drawing yourself back to a point where you are acting out in the world as a conscious arbiter of manifestation of your future. And there's not manifestation in the law of attraction sense, the manifestation of the future in the sense of like all that you are as a result of what you've thought. If you can change the way you think, you can exert massive influence to at this point in the timeline on your future self, like on your potential future selves. You guide yourself more and more towards a certain, like, basically destiny. And it's my belief that, but this is just a belief, so I'll preface it with that. It's my belief that this impelling force. So you've got the compelling force. You're driven by compulsions, but you've also got the impelling force of, like, the course of your destiny drawing you forward towards these potential outcomes. And like I gave the example of joining a group, so it might be a case of you join a gym, for example, and you meet someone there who suggests you do a class with them, you take yoga, and then that takes you down a certain path. It may be whatever. You join a company, you get a job in a certain company, and that dramatically alters the course of your destiny in a way that is unforeseeable to you in the present moment, but in a long enough scale, with a long enough sense of evolution, you'll see this dramatic, compelling narrative unfold. And as I say, it's as simple. I was going to say it's as simple as that, but that's actually quite complex kind of notion to a certain degree. You are in. When you take stock of yourself, the first thing that happens is you see what you can act on and what you can't act on. So I can't change the colour of the sky. I can't change the tone of my skin. I can't change the physical manifestation of my body in any meaningful way without it, with the exception of, like, growth, exchange, exercise, so on and so forth. But implicitly there's, like, I am this person, like, so there's only a certain degree to which you can impact meaningful change in an individual or a state or a timeline without a radical change in, like, intention or perception or self-perception. And the ways in which you can manifest the greatest change is to go through, for example, people talk about this with psilocybin, they go through a dramatic, sustained, like psychedelic mushrooms, a dramatic, sustained personality change that is permanent. And that's just one example, but these can be manifested without the need for such an extreme mystical thing. It's like, you know, every decision you make, this is something I've been trying to come to in my waffly way, every decision you make that creates a fork in the timeline, you know, there is an opportunity there for multiplicitous branches of existence to unfold along that narrative chain. And the issue, as I see it, is a lot of people's thought processes, a lot of people's mentation, their internal world, their like their internal narratives, their internal dialogues, their internal sense is automated in a very automatic, robotic fashion. That's what I'm looking for. And opening yourself up to neurogenesis through however that may be done can actually literally alter, like, your personality. It can alter, and this can be done in a variety of ways. I'm not just indicating mushrooms. There's ways in which you can bring about a dramatic overhaul in personality. Now look at this inversely, like, just to justify my point. Trauma. You put someone in a car crash, for example. That is going to have, like, this untold level of relatively permanent or long-term effect on their psyche, and you see this all the time. And all I'm implying is that the positive version of that can take place. That there is a way in such that you can bring about positive, dramatic changes that utterly alter your timeline and drag you into a different future. Now, after this section, we're going to get into some of the more trippy, bizarre things that I believe and how I think they play into this system of understanding. So, the more alternative or unusual things that I might bring to the table would include things like in my own personal experience of prayer. So whatever you may feel, you may be religious, you may not be religious, you may be agnostic, or there may be any variation in potential theological opinion, but it is my experience that when directing towards some internal or eternal internal manifestation of me, some deeper part of the nature of things, I'm able to bring about in my life these more dramatic changes. So that's one way, like setting a focus, like a pure, honest, sincere, like for give an example. Take the traditional sort of Christian prayer, like, and the idea is that you're speaking to God, right, in Christianity. So your prayer is directly to a God or to God or an angel, and the idea is that this God that you're talking to in Christianity specifically knows everything that you think, knows everything that you do, knows everything you've done and that you will do, and so there can be no dishonesty, there can be no falsehood. You can't say anything that is insincere and expect that to have any credence with this entity that you're interacting with. Now, the internal version of that thing is our conscience. You know, our conscience knows all of our bullshit, it knows all of our lies, it knows everything we've ever done, and it is a part of us, but it's seemingly disparate. You know, it's the part that like wakes you up in the middle of the night to remind you of when you were 5 and you threw someone's lolly on the floor. I made that up, but it's just do you know what I mean? Like the things you've done that are not in line with the highest form of who you could be are reflected back to you, and the idea that if you pray from that perspective, whether it's to God or your own conscience, your own internal structure, your own highest self, whatever you might want to call it, the idea is that if you can get a prayer through all of that ruthless intellectual self-honesty, what you actually end up saying to that either disparate part of the self or to God or whatever you want to believe, what ends up coming out, if you're doing it sincerely and correctly, in my opinion, is this really pure intent, this really pure form of what it is that you're actually asking of from the universe, and then it starts to act for you in relationship to that. And it seems to me that it is essential that this idea that that thing you're praying to is some part of you that it knows everything you know, and even if that's just you, like that's actually inseparable from the effect of like the degree to which you acknowledge that internal truth is the degree to which your prayer enacts in the universe. And then for me, this is where it gets slightly more weird and trippy, is like I can do that, I go through phases of doing it more and doing it less, and the more I do it, the more I find that I get little responses from reality. And this, I'm diagnosed with schizophrenia, whatever, this is about discussing, this channel is specifically about discussing the alternate explanations for and the spiritual phenomena rather than my mental health. So think whatever you will, but it might be interesting. I find that the more you put out these pure intense intents, the more you start to see little waveforms pop up in reality where that need or that aspiration or that desire or that prayer is subtly met in a way that is enormously gratifying. And the more you actually figure out what that feels like and how to navigate that, the more you're able to bring around phenomenologically interesting events and synchronicities. I'm sure this is probably nothing new to most people watching this, and if it is, I hope it's fascinating. The idea for me is that initial emotional detachment, that full assessment of your life, and then what do you really want? What does the fabric of your being, honestly, in the totality of your experience, what does the fabric of your being need from the universe that acts for you? And then if you come from that place, you'll find you way more effective. And aligned with that is the idea that this is a really weird one for me, but that there are non-physical forces, non-physical systems of energy or connection or alignment that you can interact with that will present themselves in the similar way that your own prayer and synchronistic self-determined identification with where you want to go or what you need or what you desire or how you want to be, they will present themselves in similar ways with these synchronous kind of events. And then you can be brought in to what some people might consider angelic or non-physical or spirit entities or all these kind of things that people aren't that comfortable talking about, but it's happened to me for years, so I'm just going to talk about it like I experienced it rather than prefacing it or air quoting all the things I'm saying. The point is that like these manifestations of your own prayer is like your thought form being expressed on reality and then reacted to. And what you realise over time, if you do experiment with this, is that there are other thought forms, other entities out there that you can align with, or ally with, or conflict with, and then you start to navigate a kind of existential web, like a soup of multiform intentions of all these like conscious arbiters, whether they be physical or non-physical, and you start to take yourself down a path where you can realise, like, there's the compulsion driving you forward, the instinct, the nature, then there's the desire, the evolution, the conscious self drawing yourself through to the future, the impelling force, and then there's also side quests, there's also the main quest that you need to focus on and reiterate and get navigated through. But you might find that the side quests end up being more interesting, more rewarding than you expect. And I need to breathe, so I shall return post haste. So the final level of this conversation, which is just me really ranting out ideas as quickly as I can, but I think I'm doing quite well with this so far, fingers crossed, hope you're enjoying. The final idea is that, like, with each one of these decisions, each one of these timelines, and accompanying the prayer, the thought, the impelling force, the compelling force, the side quests, the dramatic changes of psyche that implement massively different timelines. The idea that this is a relatively popular idea, but one that I really ascribe to, is the idea that every decision creates a new timeline, and therefore you can dramatically alter your timeline based on a very, very small subset of information. So like one decision, like the butterfly effect, can be embodied throughout your entire life, depending on what it is. And you see this all the time with like bad decisions all the time, but we also occasionally, it's less common, but you see it with a good decision that leads to just this one moment of realization that spirals out of control into this beautiful, fantastic life that otherwise might not ever happen. And sometimes it starts with a bad decision that then you restore your honor within. You do the right thing. And so basically what I'm saying is that you cannot jump linearly from timeline to timeline. You can't go from this potential reality to this potential reality that are at loggerheads and not manifest in the same sequence of interspatial narrative, or whatever you want to call it, like the dimensional narrative. You can't go from one to the other, but you can, at any given point of the equal sign, you can veer off down a dramatically different timeline. And it's kind of a spiritual principle. It's like the idea that in this moment you can dramatically alter the course of your future, and that every moment is like that. So you need this emotional distance, this clarity, this focus, this awareness of your own personal algorithms to be able to navigate the timeline. I hope any of that made sense at all. I've been David Bradley, this is From the Mind of a Mystic. I hope you enjoyed watching. Please leave likes, comments, dislikes if you really have to, and share with anyone that might find interesting. Thanks for watching. Peace.